Hi there, and welcome to this workshop. It's all about transitioning back to school after lockdown and managing your children's worries. My name's Lucy and I'm joined with my colleague Molly.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so if we just look at the areas we're going to cover today, they are hopes and goals for the workshop. We're going to cover common worries for children when they return to school. We're going to talk about, what exactly is anxiety and what we can do to help. Okay, so different children do have different feelings about returning to school. And in this talk, we're going to focus on what children generally have, their common worries around returning to school. Many worries are understandable in this current context, and it's understandable that some children will be feeling apprehensive about returning to school after being at home for so long. So some of the common worries are, I might catch coronavirus, I won't remember the new rules, what if my friends aren't in the same bubble, I'll miss my mum and dad. So there's lots of worries, and they can generally be grouped into different areas of concern. Like one area is catching coronavirus, another one is not remembering stuff, or it could be separation anxiety or friendship worries. So it's important to note that there's not one universal worry for children and families. Okay. So children won't necessarily tell us outright when they feel worried. So us adults need to be aware of some of the key things to watch out for and possible signals that children are feeling worried. Anxiety usually comes out in children in three main ways. So that's body sensation, anxious thoughts and anxious behaviour. And we'll go through each of these in turn more thoroughly later, but this is just a quick overview to start with. So when we're feeling anxious, our bodies respond in very specific ways, and the fight or flight response is activated. So in other words, they'll either want to avoid things and run away, or they want to fight against it. Children may complain of having a tummy ache, a headache, or just say that they're generally feeling unwell. With heightened sensitivity to coronavirus at the moment, it's understandable that parents will feel concerned if their child says they're feeling unwell. But for adults, it's really important to hold in mind that these are also symptoms of anxiety. So anxious thinking tends to focus on two aspects. So that's overestimating the thought of danger and with a feeling that you won't be able to manage it, and also underestimating your ability to cope with something if it did happen. Okay, and children's behaviour may change when they're anxious. So for any of us, when something really difficult or worrying happens, it's natural for us to want to avoid it. And children are the same. If they're worried about going to school, then they may try hard to get out of it by kicking up a fuss. Wanting to avoid something you're worried about is understandable, but it doesn't help in the long run. If children are allowed to avoid everything they find difficult, they won't ever get the chance to manage it or know that it's easier than they thought. The other thing that anxious children do is ask for reassurance and want to check out what's going to happen and what it will look like and get the reassurance that it's going to be okay. And again, it's natural to want to reassure, but if we always do that, then children will always look to us to tell them that something's safe rather than learning to make their own judgments. Okay, so that was just a quick overview. So if we move on, so we're going to think in a bit more detail now about the bodily sensations children often have when they're anxious and how you can talk to them about it. So as we previously mentioned, body sensations are a key characteristic of anxiety. The common ones are heart racing, feeling sick, and they're all based on the fight and flight response, and they happen to prepare you for action. It's worth thinking about what you notice when your child worries, or what do you notice in yourself when you worry. So for an older child, it was probably going to be a good idea to show them the picture on the left with the more detail. And then for your younger child, it's good to draw a rough body outline and think with them about where they feel their worries in their body. It will help give you a shared understanding with your child about the differences, for example, between a worry tummy ache and a needing to go to the toilet tummy ache. So if we look at the example that the child's drawn, we can see that they've written round and round above their head. So that's obviously that circular feelings, ruminating going on. Their heart is beating fast, and they've got a busy tummy, and they've got flowers in their tummy. And I'm assuming that's a similar feeling to having butterflies in their tummy. Okay, so it is understandable that parents are cautious about illness at the moment, but it's really worth not jumping straight into thinking it's a physical complaint. If your child says that they're feeling unwell, and it's good to hold in mind that it's the most common ways in which worries come out in children, especially younger ones. Okay, so if we're moving on, so this is about anxious thinking. So anxious thinking is overestimating how bad something will be and underestimating how well you can cope when it does happen. So here are some examples that children might be thinking about coming back to school. So, you know, it'll be awful, I won't manage, the teacher will be cross with me. So when a child or even a parent is catastrophizing and jumping to conclusions about all the things that can go wrong and minimizing how well they can manage it, it's understandable that they're going to feel worried. And for most parents, it's really, really difficult to hear your child say things like this. So do try and catch your own thoughts so that you just don't automatically jump in and join in with your child's anxiety. So it's important to try and not treat these thoughts as facts. They're worries, even though they do have a little bit of reality behind them. Try asking your child some gentle questions to help them evaluate whether it will be as likely as bad as they fear. So what would be so bad about it, for example? Or do you remember what it was like before lockdown at school? And is your teacher usually cross with you when you make a mistake? Or how about if you bump into someone who's well and move away quickly, how likely is it that you will catch coronavirus? So they're just a few sample questions. So it will also help your child to think about what would they do if it didn't turn out the way they wanted to and it was difficult. So ask them what their plan would be, or what would they say to themselves. Bringing down the fear and raising a child's sense of being able to help or having a plan will help lower their anxiety, and it will help them feel more confident. So just moving on. So children react to anxiety in different ways. Some may become withdrawn or clingy. Some might ask lots of questions about what will happen to seek reassurance. So watch out for those what if questions. You know, what if this happens? What if I get lost? What if I catch coronavirus? Sometimes behaviour can deteriorate. Children might shout or behave badly if they're overloaded with anxiety. Small things that they can usually manage might make them snap. Or sometimes children find it too overwhelming to describe what's happening, or they don't have the language to describe, and that will come out in tantrums. Some children try and avoid things just to get rid of those feelings really quickly. So it's useful for you to think about how your child's behaviour changes and how you respond to it yourself. So the key really is to be alert to a change in behaviour in your child. If they're behaving very differently to normal, then that would be a warning sign that their emotions or worries might be hard for them to manage. So in summary, It's really easy for parents to become frustrated with poor behaviour and tell children off for being naughty. But if this isn't how your child generally behaves, try and look beyond the behaviour and try and understand what's going on underneath.
Okay, so now we're going to think about how you can find out what your child is worried about. Some children, particularly younger children, aren't able to verbalise what they're scared of or why they're scared of it. Like most of us, children don't respond well to being interrogated or nagged to say what's wrong, but it's important to give them some space to talk to you. You can start by letting your child know that you've noticed they seem a bit out of sorts and give them an opportunity to let you know what's going on. You could say, "You seem worried. Would you like a hug while you tell me about it?" You can follow up with open-ended questions, but if your child can't tell you what's going on, then stop. Sometimes children know that they don't feel good, but they just don't know why themselves. You can normalise this by letting them know that lots of children have worries and they're not the only one. If you have an idea what's going on, you can frame it tentatively and voice it for them. You could say, "I wonder whether going back to school might be troubling you a little bit." The most important thing you can do is listen and give your child some space to speak. Parents often find it hard to sit with their child's emotion, and it's natural for parents to want their child to feel better. This means that we often jump in to give advice or suggestions just because we want to help. Try to bite your tongue and just concentrate on listening first to make sure you've properly understood what's going on. Feeling heard can be very powerful in its own right, and sometimes that's all that's needed for children to move on from their worries. Sometimes they'll even come up with their own ideas if they're given the space to do so. You can offer advice or suggestions only once your child feels that you've really understood what they are saying. It can be very helpful to validate your child's emotions. You can mention that you might see that they're angry or that they're having tantrums, and that those feelings are okay, but certain behaviours such as hitting are not okay. But if your child does have tantrums, it can be useful to make the time to talk about it with them when they're feeling better and when they're calm. So we're going to think about 5 practical things that you can do with your child to help them prepare for going back to school. Helping children to have a couple of things that they can do to relax themselves in the moment is very useful, and we're going to think about some relaxation and breathing strategies. And lastly, we know that children watch their parents closely, and so noting how your own feelings and responses may feed into your child's anxiety is also important. So this is a bit of a crowded slide, but we thought it would be useful for you to have an overview of what you can do to help your child prepare at a very practical level. We've already discussed the importance of checking children's worries out with them, and you can help them think about how realistic their worry is and evaluate with them whether it will really be as difficult as they think it's going to be. It's useful to check your child's understanding of what they've learned by asking them how they would talk to a friend about it who had a similar worry, and this also gives them a chance to practice telling themselves again. So you could ask them what they would say to their friend. How could they help them keep their worry down at a more realistic level? It's important to recognise that many worries do have some basis in reality, and it's not about taking that worry away, it's just making it a bit more realistic and more manageable. So for number 2, if we could think about how would you cope? If their worry does come true, it's helpful for your child to plan what they would do in this situation. You could ask them how would they cope. Anxiety is fueled by uncertainty, and if they have some ideas about how they would cope if the worst happened, it will give your child more confidence. And now if we think about number 3, most children's sleep routines have been affected by lockdown. Most children are going to bed later than usual, and some may be getting up later in the morning as a result. It's much harder to feel calm and manage your worries when children are overtired. So getting back to having a good routine around sleep is really important for helping children to feel prepared for going back to school. Putting children to bed early rarely works, as children will not fall asleep if they're not tired. A much better idea is to gradually wake them up a bit earlier each day so that they feel more tired earlier in the evening. And a tip is natural light in the morning also helps reset the body clock. And if it's possible, it's good to get the children outside in the morning if you can. And to help children get back into the routine, you could practice getting up at the right time and getting ready for school a few days before they actually return. And for very anxious children, you may wish to practice the school walk and go to look at the school from the outside. And just a tip on number 5, children pick up on parents' anxiety, so consider how you talk to them about the return to school. Make sure school isn't always the main topic of conversation, and don't keep coming back to it yourself. It's best to talk about it maybe once each day and then answer questions when your child does raise it by themselves. So now we're going to look at some relaxation strategies, and they're helpful to use whenever your child is in a state of heightened arousal, or if they're really excited about something. It's best to practice these when your children are calm, and so that they can learn them for when they are in a heightened state. And we're first going to practice squeezing a lemon. So what we're going to do, I do have 2 lemons in each hand, but I want you to pretend that you do. And I want you to squeeze them really, really hard for 10 seconds. So we're going to practice now. So 1, squeeze them really, really hard. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, don't let a single drop go. 8, 9, 10. Now relax and let the lemon drop from your hand. And see how much better your hand and arm feel when they are relaxed. And what this is doing is letting all of the tension go, hopefully in your arms. And the second relaxation strategy we're going to try is pretending that we are a turtle. What I want you to do is pull your head into your shell. So how we're going to do this is pulling up your shoulders to your ears and push down your head into your shoulders. And you're going to hold it tight for 10 seconds again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and let it go. And what this is doing is hopefully relaxing the tension in your neck and your shoulders. And this can be really nice to do at the end of a really long day, just before bed. And so if you want to practice those after this workshop with your children when they're calm. And we're going to do a breathing exercise as well. So we thought we could do hold in deep breaths for 3 breaths. You hold it for 4, and then we're going to let it out for 4. So if we put one hand on our tummy and one hand on our chest, going to breathe in for 3, hold for 4, and then out for 4. So breathe in for 3, hold for 4, and out for 4. Okay, well done. And what this is doing is concentrating on counting, distracting from your thoughts, and also giving you a physiological response in the body. Okay, so this is just a slide about reminding you about how giving reassurance or becoming overly protective can backfire when managing anxiety. Breaking down worries into smaller steps can be very helpful and feel less overwhelming. It's really important to acknowledge and praise brave behaviour, or when you hear anything that indicates your child is trying to manage their worries. So this is a slide about how parents can manage their own emotions. Our children are heavily influenced by how we act and what we do, so it's really helpful for us to monitor our own emotions when supporting them with their worries. Once the decision is made, try not to be wobbly about it. Try and tell yourself it will be okay and that your child will manage, otherwise they will pick up on how you're feeling. You may be more worried about the return to school than your child, which is completely natural, but it's important to take a step back and look at how they're really doing and separate it from your own concerns. It's also important to feel supported, so do share your concerns with trusted family members or friends if you can. And also, if you let the school know, they can be aware that this is a difficult step for you and your child. And it's also important for you to take time for yourself and not feel guilty about it.
So if you have further concerns about your child or their worries, this book is really helpful for parents, and it is easily available online. There's also helpful information on the NHS website, and you can see the link here. Or alternatively, you could speak to your child's GP or the mental health lead at your school, who can also help you identify any additional support that they have available. So thanks very much for listening. We hope you found the presentation helpful.